They were the envy of everyone, a couple who seemed to have it all. But in a single moment, with a single comment, their perfect life unraveled into a nightmare. What happens when love, trust, and betrayal collide in a world obsessed with social validation? How far can heartbreak push a person before they break? Before we dive into this shocking case, hit the like button and subscribe for more chilling tales of love, lies, and murder. Jakia Ricks moved through life like a woman who had already won. Every post, every smile, every curated moment was a testament to the picture-perfect life she had built with Rashad Glover. Her Instagram was a highlight reel of love, success, and effortless beauty, a sunlit vacation here, a new business venture there, a stolen kiss with her husband caught in the golden hour. From the outside looking in, she had it all. A thriving salon in the heart of Birmingham, a wardrobe full of designer labels, and a husband who, at least in public, adored her. Rashad was the reformed bad boy every woman wanted but only she had managed to claim. Jakia had seen his past, felt the heat of it in the whispered warnings from jealous exes, the wary side eyes from women who thought they knew him better, but she had chosen to believe she was different. That she had done what no other woman could, tamed him. Their love story played out in grand gestures. The whirlwind romance that had everyone talking. The lavish wedding where even the doubters had to admit they looked good together. The gleaming house, bought in her name, standing as a symbol of their fresh start. It was easy to believe in the illusion when it was packaged so beautifully. Easy to ignore the quiet doubts that crept in late at night when Rashad was out longer than expected. Or when a lingering glance at his phone sent something sharp and uneasy curling in her gut. Jakia silenced those thoughts. She had built her brand on strength, resilience, and knowing how to hold on to what was hers. Rashad loved her. That much, she was sure of. They had worked too hard to get here, to become the couple that people admired, envied even. And if a few lingering shadows from his past still lurked, well, that was just the price of loving a man like him. Rashad Glover knew how to command a room. Even without trying, he had a presence that made people take notice. It wasn't just his looks, though his deep brown skin, chiseled jaw, and confident stride had never hurt. It was the way he moved, the way he spoke. A man who had come from nothing and made something of himself, who had left the streets behind but still carried that edge, that knowing glint in his eye that made men respect him and women wonder. He had lived fast in his younger days, money, women, trouble. But that was before Jakia. She was his peace, his upgrade. With her, he had learned the art of stability, of waking up to the same woman every morning, of pretending he didn't sometimes miss the thrill of his old life. He had a family now, a home, a new business that kept his name clean. He had made it out. Or so he told himself. The truth was, the past never really let go. And some people were harder to leave behind than others. Tyre Boone had always been a problem. She wasn't just another woman Rashad had once entertained, she was the one who never fully disappeared. The one who had seen him at his worst and still wanted him. Jakia had made it clear from the beginning that Tyre was a threat, a name that carried weight in their arguments, a wound that never fully closed. And though Rashad had promised, again and again, that there was nothing left between them, that promise felt increasingly fragile. Tyre wasn't the kind of woman to stay in the past where she belonged. And as much as Jakia wanted to believe her love was enough to keep Rashad from slipping, deep down, she knew better. The world saw them as a power couple. A love story worth aspiring to. But behind the filtered photos and the practiced smiles, something was shifting. The foundation beneath their perfect life wasn't as solid as it seemed. And sooner or later, the cracks would start to show. Jakia had never been the type to snoop. She prided herself on trust, on believing in the strength of the vows she and Rashad had exchanged. But trust was a fragile thing, and lately, it felt as though hers was being tested in ways she couldn't ignore. It started subtly, small moments that seemed insignificant at first. Rashad's late nights, his hushed phone calls, the way he kept his phone face down whenever he was home. She would ask questions, and he would always have answers. Work ran late. A homie needed a favor. He had to clear his mind. Jakia tried to accept those explanations, but doubt had a way of seeping in through the cracks. She would roll over in bed at night, reaching for him, only to find his side cold. When she asked, he kissed her forehead, whispered reassurances that felt empty even as they lingered in the air between them. She told herself she was imagining things, but the nagging suspicion never quite disappeared. Tyre Boone had always been there, an inescapable shadow lurking in the background of Jakia's marriage. She wasn't just some ex. She was the mother of Rashad's youngest child, a tie that bound them together in ways Jakia could never undo. There was a time when she believed Rashad had moved on, that his past with Tyre was just that, past. But now, she wasn't so sure. Tyre Shah carried herself with a confidence that unnerved Jakia. She knew the power she held, the history she shared with Rashad. And despite Rashad's reassurances that it was nothing, that he only dealt with her because of the child they shared, Jakia couldn't shake the feeling that Tyre Shah was still a presence in his life in ways that went beyond co-parenting. One evening, as Jakia sat in the dim light of their bedroom, she stared at Rashad's phone on the nightstand. It was locked, as always. She had never been one to invade his privacy, but something in her stomach twisted with a deep, unsettling certainty. The weight of everything unspoken, every late-night errand, every whispered phone call, it was all pressing down on her now. She reached for the phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. Her heartbeat pounded against her ribs. If she opened Pandora's box, there would be no turning back. But before she could touch it, she heard the front door open. Rashad was home. And just like that, the moment passed. She pulled the covers over herself, pretending to be asleep. He moved through the room quietly, slipping into bed beside her. His scent, familiar, comforting, yet somehow foreign, enveloped her. Jakia kept her eyes closed, her breathing steady. But in the silence, her mind raced. Beneath the surface, something was shifting. And no matter how much she wanted to deny it, she knew, deep down, nothing would ever be the same. Jakia's heart pounded as she stared at the comment, her stomach twisting into knots. The words blurred before her eyes, but she didn't need to reread them. She understood their meaning instantly. Her hands trembled as she clicked on Tyresha's profile, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The page loaded, revealing a mix of selfies, party pictures, and vague statuses clearly meant to be subliminal shots at someone. Then she saw it, a blurry Snapchat screenshot. A tattooed arm holding a Hennessy bottle, resting against soft sheets. The timestamp, last night. Jakia's mind raced. She knew Rashad's tattoos. She had traced them with her fingers, kissed them, memorized their patterns like a sacred script. There was no mistaking it. That was his arm. Her chest tightened as she scrolled through the comments under the post. Laughing emojis. A few girl, you messy responses. Someone had even tagged her. Jakia's face burned with humiliation. Then, she read the comment again, the one that sent her world crashing down. Girl, enjoy it while it lasts. He was just at my house last night. Her fingers hovered over Rashad's name in her contacts. Her first instinct was to call him, demand an explanation, force him to tell her the truth. But what would he say? She could already hear the lies forming in his mouth. That's not me. She's lying. You really gonna believe a Facebook comment over me? She dropped the phone onto her lap, clenching her jaw. She needed proof. Solid proof. Swiping back to Tyresha's profile, she composed a message. What exactly are you trying to say? The 3 dots appeared instantly. I mean exactly what I said. Rashad was at my house last night. And it wasn't just to chill. Jakia's blood ran cold. She could almost feel her world cracking beneath her feet. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. Prove it. A few seconds later, her phone buzzed. A new message. A video. Jakia hesitated, her thumb hovering over the play button. She took a shaky breath and tapped it. The screen flickered to life, revealing Rashad's unmistakable voice. Laughing. Talking. Calling Tyre Shah, baby. The camera shifted slightly, catching his profile for a split second before he pulled her into his lap. Then the video cut off. Jakia's entire body went numb. The proof she wanted was now the dagger twisting in her chest. She stared at the screen, feeling something deep inside her break. He had done this. He had betrayed her, humiliated her, and now the whole world knew before she did. Her hands tightened into fists. Her vision blurred with tears, but she refused to cry. Not yet. She wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Instead, she grabbed her phone, scrolled back to the Facebook post and started typing. Enjoy your leftovers, sis. He was just telling me he loved me this morning. She hit send. And just like that, the war began. Jakia's whole body trembled as she stood over Rashad, her breath ragged, her heart hammering like a war drum. The room reeked of iron, thick and suffocating. The beige couch, once the centerpiece of their shared space, was now drenched in deep crimson. Blood dripped onto the hardwood floor, seeping into the cracks, forming a dark, widening pool. Rashad's eyes, once so full of arrogance, now stared blankly at the ceiling, glassy and lifeless. His lips, the same lips that had smirked at her just moments ago, were now parted in a frozen gasp, the last breath he never got to take. His once pristine white t-shirt was shredded, stained dark with his own blood, slashed open by the fury she had unleashed. Her hands, sticky and slick with the warmth of his betrayal, still gripped the butcher knife, the blade glistening under the dim glow of the overhead light. She had lost count of the number of times she plunged it into him. The force behind each stab had been raw, primal, fueled by the image of that smirk, by the smugness of his denial, by the unbearable weight of her humiliation. But even as his body twitched in its final spasms, it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. She dropped to her knees beside him, her chest heaving. Her hands moved without thought, driven by something dark and insatiable. The tip of the blade pressed against his cooling flesh, carving slow, deliberate letters into the skin stretched across his chest. Deep, jagged lines. The letters took shape, dripping with finality. Liar. She wanted the world to see. She wanted it to be undeniable. The same way she had been forced to see the truth through that damn Facebook comment. Her breath hitched as she leaned back, taking in her work. The words stood out grotesquely against his ruined torso, the flesh peeled back, exposing muscle, the blood pooling into the grooves of the letters like ink filling a pen stroke. A distant buzzing filled her ears. Her vision wavered. Reality crept back in like a slow-moving tide, washing over the brutal scene. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, but the room was deathly silent. The knife slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor with a sickening thud. Her hands, her arms, her entire body, were painted in Rashad's blood, the evidence of what she had done etched into her skin. The weight of it all pressed down on her, suffocating, consuming. The room spun. The walls felt like they were closing in. She could hear her own breath, ragged, uneven, could feel the sting of sweat mixing with blood on her skin. Then, as if pulled from the depths of a trance, she heard something. A vibration. A soft hum, barely noticeable over the pounding in her ears. Her phone. Still on the floor. Still open to Facebook. A new notification. Someone had commented on her post. She let out a hollow, breathless laugh. The world hadn't stopped. It hadn't noticed. Not yet. But it would. She scrolled back to the comment that started it all. Tyresha's smug words stared back at her, still burning like salt in an open wound. Jakia's lips curled into something between a snarl and a sob as she started typing. Hope you happy now, bitch. She hit send. The weight in her chest didn't ease. If anything, it only grew heavier. She stared at the words on the screen, waiting for some kind of relief, some sense of finality, but it never came. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. The only sound was the quiet dripping of blood onto the floor. Then, distant but growing closer, came the wail of sirens. Her heart clenched. Her body swayed slightly as reality crashed down on her. The neighbors must have heard the screams. Maybe someone had seen her post. It didn't matter. They were coming. A knock, no, a pounding, on the door made her flinch. Police. Open up. She didn't move. Couldn't. Her legs felt like lead, her brain foggy and slow. Another slam against the door. Then another. The sharp crack of wood splintering filled the apartment as the door burst open, and suddenly, they were inside. A blur of dark uniforms. Shouted commands. Flashing lights. The gleam of drawn weapons. Get on the ground. Hands where we can see them. Jakia didn't fight. Didn't run. Didn't even speak. She simply let her knees buckle, let her blood-soaked hands rise just enough to show she wasn't a threat. The cold press of a knee against her back, the snap of handcuffs locking around her wrists, it all felt distant, like she was watching someone else's life unravel instead of her own. The officers moved swiftly, securing the scene. One of them muttered something into his radio. Another hovered near Rashad's mutilated body, barely concealing his grimace as he took in the carved letters across his chest. Jesus Christ. Jakia's head lolled to the side as she was hauled to her feet. The flashing red and blue lights outside bathed the walls in streaks of color. The night air hit her skin as they led her to the squad car, but she barely felt it. A crowd had gathered. Neighbors. Strangers. People who had seen her Facebook post and rushed over for a glimpse of the unfolding nightmare. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to gasps. Phones were out, cameras rolling, capturing every moment. By morning, her name would be everywhere. She wasn't just another woman scorned. She was a killer. As they pushed her into the back seat of the police car, she caught one last glimpse of the apartment. The broken door swinging open. The pool of blood stretching across the floor. The flashing notification still lighting up her phone screen, demanding attention she would never be able to give. And then the door slammed shut. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Jakia sat motionless, her face unreadable. Only the slight trembling of her hands betrayed any emotion. The jury had deliberated for less than a day. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimonies damning. Even her defense attorney, who had painted her as a victim of emotional manipulation and public humiliation, had seemed resigned in the end. Her family sat behind her, their expressions a mix of heartbreak and exhaustion. Rashad's family sat on the other side of the aisle, stoic but victorious. Justice had been served, at least in their eyes. But what was justice, really? Was it a number? A lifetime spent behind bars? Or was it the irreversible fact that one life was lost and another destroyed in the span of a single, blood-soaked night? Jakia had not spoken much since her arrest. Her initial hysteria had given way to an eerie stillness. The tears had dried. The rage had dulled. She had listened in silence as psychologists debated the effects of public shaming on mental stability, as her past was dissected, and as prosecutors detailed, with brutal clarity, the exact manner in which she had stabbed Rashad. She had heard them argue whether she was a woman pushed to the brink by betrayal and cyberbullying or merely an unhinged, jealous wife who couldn't stand to lose. She had heard Rashad's mother wail on the stand, begging for the harshest punishment possible. She had watched as Rashad's father shook his head, unable to comprehend how it had come to this. And now, the sentence was handed down. 35 years to life. The weight of those words settled over the room like a thick fog. Jakia showed no reaction. She merely nodded as if she had expected nothing else. She did not look back at her family as she was led out of the courtroom in cuffs. If she had, she would have seen her mother weeping into her hands, her father staring blankly ahead, her younger sister clutching the sides of the pew as if she might collapse. Outside the courthouse, the debate raged on. The media swarmed, eager to capture reactions, to fuel the public discourse that had taken on a life of its own since the trial began. There were those who sympathized with Jakia, arguing that Rashad had played a cruel game with her emotions, that his deception had been the catalyst for an inevitable explosion. Others saw her as a monster, a woman who had committed an act of pure, unfiltered rage over something as trivial as an internet post. Friends of Rashad described him as charming, ambitious, and well-loved. Friends of Jakia described her as fiercely loyal, deeply passionate, but ultimately unstable. The internet was divided. Social media, the very thing that had fueled the feud, now became a battleground. Some users saw Jakia as a warning: be careful who you love, be careful what you say, be careful how much of yourself you invest in another person. Others saw her as a villain, a woman whose actions were inexcusable, no matter the circumstances. And then there was Tyre Shah, the woman at the center of it all, the woman whose name had first ignited Jakia's fury. She never showed up to court. Never made another comment. Her silence was deafening. Some speculated she had gone into hiding, afraid of the backlash. Others believed she had moved on, that Jakia and Rashad's tragedy was nothing more than a brief chapter in her life. Days turned into weeks, and the fervor around the case slowly began to fade. Jakia was processed into the state penitentiary, her new reality one of concrete walls and metal bars. She spent her days in silence, her nights staring at the ceiling of her cell, haunted by the life she had thrown away. But outside, the world moved on. Another scandal, another trial, another tragedy. Jakia had been a trending topic, a source of entertainment and debate, but soon, she became just another name in the system. The echoes of her rage, her heartbreak, and her crime would linger in those who had followed the case, but for the majority, she was just another statistic, another woman who had let love turn into something dark and irreversible. And so, the world turned. Justice had been served. Or at least, that's what they all told themselves. The tragic case of Jakia and Rashad serves as a haunting reminder of how love, obsession, and betrayal can intertwine in the digital age. It is a testament to the power of emotions left unchecked, to the destruction that can unfold when heartbreak turns into something far more sinister. Social media amplifies every feeling, every slight, every misstep, turning private pain into public spectacle. In a world where our lives are constantly on display, where validation is sought in clicks and comments, how much of ourselves are we willing to sacrifice in the pursuit of love and acceptance? Jakia's story is not just about one woman's descent into madness, it is about all of us, about the dangers of letting digital perception shape our reality. The question remains, could this tragedy have been avoided? Was Jakia merely a victim of emotional manipulation, of a world that chewed her up and spit her out when she no longer fit the narrative? Or was she simply a woman who let rage consume her, unable to see past the betrayal to the consequences of her actions? Was she pushed to the edge, or did she willingly leap? We may never have definitive answers, but the discussion continues. What do you think? Could this have ended differently, or was this inevitable from the start? Share your thoughts, because these are the conversations that force us to confront the darkest corners of human nature. If this story left you shaken, if it made you reconsider the power of love and the depths of human emotion, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. More stories lie ahead, tales that delve into the intersections of love, lies, and betrayal, uncovering the unsettling truths that lurk beneath the surface.